very exciting series, 5. They'd given us a bit more money because it was a hit by now. And they'd thrown a lot more money at it.
In fact, I checked the records to find out how much it was. It was £6,000.
It looked quite cool. It looked quite cinematic.
We had shows like Terraform, we had shows like High and Low, you know, there were a lot of sort of high sci-fi concepts coming into that as well.
They were genius ideas they came up with, and really complex ideas. And I think that was the first series I was aware of the sheer scientific complexity of what they were dealing with.
It's a half-hour story, but there's so much in that half hour. When it's over, you think, God, that felt like 90 minutes, you know? I mean, there's so much crammed in.
From a design point of view, there was a lot more creativity, if that makes sense. We were able to have more free range.
Series 5 we had Hilary Bevan-Jones producing and Juliet May directing, which is the first time we'd had. It was a kind of change of lineup in that department. I think because Ed was busy with other projects, with Ruby's series and things like that. And she was. I really got on with Juliet. She was great fun. She dived in to the mayhem that is Dwarf, with reckless abandon.
I was working at Noel Gay Television, which Paul Jackson ran, and we were doing a lot of work for Sky B, and I just finished a sitcom for Paul, and the Red Dwarf job came up, and Paul recommended me to Rob and Doug.
Paul had made many recommendations throughout Red Dwarf, and they were nearly always terrific. So we didn't really question it. We didn't ask any other questions that you would have done in a normal situation.
Well, you sound exactly what we're looking for. Are there any questions that you'd like to ask us?
That was strange for all of us because we knew that Ed had been so much a part of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, Ed has always been part of the team, as they say, and it was a sort of studio without him was always going to feel slightly empty because he's got a great personality and a great... not empty, but you know, he's a very sort of what's the word, gung-ho sort of chap, and he's got the personality that you actually need to run a studio floor, I think.
They wanted Ed, and that's totally understandable. They didn't want change, and frankly, you could have put in Spielberg, and they would have gone, you know, well, will he be as good as Ed?
It was interesting actually to have a woman on board, and I think everyone was actually quite, you know, in a way. Had sort of different expectations, but maybe a female input might have added another element to it. So it was all kind of still exciting.
If we don't get to him before that grave is filmed, we'll
Film the grave.
film the grave.
Film the grave, man.
They were quite mischievous, the cast, amongst themselves, and mischievous to each other, which is always great fun because you sort of can use that energy.
We got on with her very well. I mean, I think it is a hugely difficult show to make, and she was quite new to the business at that time.
It's very odd when you watch a series that you haven't yet directed. You don't really pick up much at all. It's only when you get onto the studio floor that you realise what a monster it is.
To suddenly come in there and have to do a job, hit your marks first time, you know, hit the ground running, as they say, was going to be quite tough, you know.
By the time I got there, they knew their characters so well. So I had no excuse, really.
Every show in Red Dwarf, you know, and Series 5 had quite a few of them, things like Demons and Angels, for example, were very complex shows, you know?
Rob and Doug were, as I said before, very keen to make it bigger, better, more glamorous, more exciting, you know, bigger explosions, better visual effects, more complicated split screens, more exotic locations, more fantastic costumes. And they really wanted feature film within a sitcom formula, which is difficult because the time constraints are enormous, and you have to shoot in front of an audience, multi-camera.
Everyone involved in that show has always said this is the hard one to do. You know, a lot of the crew had worked on other sitcoms, had worked on other shows.
What tends to happen is that a lot of the imagery we'll never ever know, and no one will ever know until the post-production.
To get your head round even a simple Red Dwarf show, even a straightforward, you know, Red Dwarf, like Marooned, for example, was a straightforward, even getting your head into that, some of the concepts, some of the characters, you know, the whole thing is always going to be difficult. And, you know, I don't think it's any reflection of her ability as a director at all.
And something that we just didn't realise at the time was that the science fiction stories that were kind of complex. She would have a very, very hard time explaining the stories to the cast and to the ensemble crew. And of course, that's absolutely key. And it's almost like having to speak in a language and when you don't know the language.
I didn't have a history of either Red Dwarf or science fiction as a genre as such. I think I'm right in saying that Rob and Doug knew each other from childhood, and they used to read science fiction books, go to every science fiction film.
Revenge of the Mutant Splat Gore Monster. Die screaming with sharp things in your head.
So they had a whole library, an encyclopedic idea of, you know, the whole of science fiction up until then, which I didn't have and couldn't share. And they were very sweet because they told me certain films that I should watch, and they used to go through certain favourite scenes of theirs and say, why did this work and why did that not work? And they were as helpful as they could have been, but I could never catch up.
In retrospect, what really should have happened was someone who should have put her arm around her. And I tried to, but she wanted to be very independent. And really, we should have got a VisFX supervisor and gone, look, here's your VisFX supervisor. He'll show you exactly what you need to do. This shot is a clean plate shot. Second shot, you need this. Third shot, you need that. And then you just say to the cast, I'm not interested in that techno side. I just want to work with you guys, get the best comedy performances. And that would have worked really well.
I remember when we were filming Terraform, actually. And Crichton's crash landed and all that, and I'm coming here to rescue him. And Juliet had the camera, his stomach, and it was like it was Crichton's POV, and I kept saying, well, no, it's his POV, and she goes, well, she kept putting the camera in his stomach. I said, no, it's his POV. It turned out that Juliet didn't know what POV meant.
For those not in the know of Tullyland, it's point of view.
And as a director, we were like, whoa.
The biggest problem I had with Red Dwarf is that I actually didn't direct series 1, 2, 3 and 4. Which Ed Bye did brilliantly, and you know, Ed and Rob and Doug, and in fact the whole of the Red Dwarf team was a very close-knit, streamlined, efficient package. And if you take the director away after 4 years and try and plug in a new one, it's not easy for anyone concerned.
And I think she felt like it was just pushing this great weight up a hill. And so I think she was relieved when the call came.
As far as we knew, we worked on the shows with her, and one day we turned up for rehearsals and Juliet just wasn't there.
It became clear that the cast had seriously lost faith, and in a kind of disruptive way, where they wanted to sit around and talk about it all the time as opposed to rehearsing. And this was really beginning to hurt the show.
I thought it was handled very well. Rob and Doug came in and said, for professional differences, we've decided that we're going to carry on doing the show.
I think we all felt a bit guilty that maybe it was a bit of our fault we hadn't given her the support that she needed, and probably we hadn't, do you know what I mean?
If I came to those scripts again now, I would find them much easier to tackle. But I learnt a lot on Red Dwarf, and funnily enough, I've taken what I've learnt on Red Dwarf onto other things, which are not nearly so sci-fi intensive, and it's been terribly useful.
But I must say, the episodes that Juliet directed are some of the best looking Red Dwarf episodes ever.
Juliet's a very successful person in the industry and doing very well and winning all kinds of acclaim, and so it didn't do too bad for her anyway.
Well, as soon as I heard that Rob and Doug were going to take over, I thought, now this will be exciting. And it was.
I think we all felt that's what they should have done anyway. But I mean, they had such a lot on their plate already because they were rewriting a lot of the scripts as we were doing them. I mean, in one particular instance, literally as we were recording it.
There was a general discussion between the two of us about who should the new director be. And Rob was absolutely adamant. He said, we should do it. And Rob was great sometimes with the confidence of ignorance. Of, yeah, it'll be fine, we can do it. And that was always my concern, because Rob usually wasn't on the director's shoulder. He was somewhere else. And so I had real concerns of, oh my God, are we biting off more than we can chew? And also what the reaction would be, whether people would think, oh, it's just Ego's gone absolutely berserk.
We knew that they knew the show so well anyway. I mean, more so than most writers know their own show, you know.
Fortunately, we were all working with Telegenic at the time, led by Rocket. I think, you couldn't ask for a better camera crew, certainly, to help ease two guys who hadn't really directed before, or they might have done one or two scenes or something here and there, but hadn't directed an entire series before. It was done very, very smoothly, the whole thing.
We had to support Rob and Doug. And we didn't really, there was no change, really. It was sort of they did very well. I don't know why they didn't continue doing it.
I exist in you as potential, but now I'm here, extrapolated from your being. Extrapolated? But there is no way you're a part of me. No part of me would ever be seen alive in sandals.
I mean, I think all the characters have developed slightly, and certainly with Lister, we gave him the longer sort of swagger coat. He had a lot more attitude, I think, in this series.
I looked like I should be in a gay bar in San Francisco. I became a biker, really. But that was fun, actually, because it just gave the whole thing a lot more texture and depth. Because when we were filming in Manchester and we were wearing sort of cottons and nylons and Hawaiian shirts and stuff like that, it's a bit naff. So this was a bit more sort of macho, and I looked like the lead singer for Judas Priest.
I think it was Camille, Series 4, when he had the female Rimmer. And it was a decision that Rob and Doug just said, the colour is great. I think we should use that. Let's put Rimmer in red.
Yeah, colour didn't worry me. It was how comfortable it was always the concern. It could have been pink with black spots for all I cared, but as long as someone else did that. I know it was yellow spots. As long as it was comfortable, I really didn't mind. I just wanted Howard to have fun there with the old the drawing board with the costumes, and he did.
The makeup did change in Series 5 in the sense of it wasn't so much the actual mould, but I think the way it was painted afterwards, that had a lot to do with it. So they would highlight the angles on the head, and that was Nina Gowan. A lot of I mean, she was brilliant at doing that, and that was hours of painstaking work, and so depressing because that mask is destroyed at the end of the day. They can't sort of keep it and use it again. But I think they did every series. I've had a new mask made. There has to be a new mould made of my head and a new mask for each series. And that one, I think they worked out how to get sharper lines and a clearer definition in the mask. So I mean, it did look fantastic. I think it's one of the best. That series had one of the best Crichton heads ever.
Every crew member is the top gun in his or her field. This is a ship, Mr. Rimmer, of superhumans.
Which is why, Captain, I feel I could really belong here.
First time we ever see the show is when is the read-through, and that was always, for me, a real highlight of the thing, because we were all excited to see what was going to be on, and I would destroy it because I laughed too much.
I mean, the first read-through, there'd like be 2 lines, and I'd sit there and think, oh no, I'm not in it. And then they would add another 3.
I'd turn the page and see the whole page a Crichton speech. And I'd see Rob and Doug grinning. No, can't I just say another cup of tea, sir? I mean, I had huge, huge speeches to learn.
Ships of no mass or volume able to travel as super-light particles, tachyons, through wormholes and stargates, crewed by holograms of great genius and bravery.
There were a lot of good episodes for Rimmer in Series 5. Yeah, when I got the script, I just thought, great, I don't know what it did for Rimmer, but for Barry, it did quite a lot, actually. I rather enjoyed it.
The thing I remember most about that is Jane Horrocks playing Nirvana Crane, the dead guy, Rimmer, getting laid again. And there's me, red-blooded male, 3 million years into deep space. Not so much as a kiss on the lips.
For the sort of sado who doesn't get women, I mean, I've had quite a good time on Red Dwarf, really.
They did it to rub my nose in it. I know they did, because I kept complaining, can you have a girlfriend? Can Lister have a girlfriend? Because Kachansky was nowhere to be seen at the time.
That is why in our society, we only believe in sex. Constant, guilt-free sex.
Jane Horrocks, who at the time was living right around the corner from me in Islington, so I used to give her lifts in, and I'd do her lines for her, which was really good. It was really encouraging, because she was a really proper actress.
She was just a fun-loving lass from the north, you know, and I was just amazed at how she managed to sort of iron out all the Lancashire, I think they are, ruled R's that she has in her, you know, accent from day to day, and sort of become out the sort of pucker, you know, hollow ship officer.
In fact, it's a ship regulation that we all have sexual congress at least twice a day. It's a health rule.
When I met her, I thought, is that her? You know, it was like you was expecting this, you know, sort of musical, lovey kind of. I was like,
I can't impersonate her. I mean, when I've been with her, I can actually hear it and then go, you know, it's so rounded and very odd. I can't quite work out what it is, but it is work out. It's very bizarre.
She's terribly northern. I mean, naturally terribly northern, and she just picked that voice and went with it, and it was just unbelievable how she so easily slipped in and out of her character.
Lister to Red Dwarf. The intruder seems to be blissfully unaware that we have a rather sturdy hollow whip in the munitions cabinet. We had that scene where I threatened to whip him with a very sturdy hollow whip, and I ate the cigarette at the end. I don't know why I did that, but it was just so stupid because it was horrible. And unless he wants his derriere minced like burger meat, he better be history in 2 seconds flat.
Thanks to Enlightenment, recon mission complete. Transmit. With speed. Enlightenment, quickly, please.
It was a very good scene, and I think that is Rob and Doug writing at their best, I have to say, and it's Craig performing at his best. And I think the chemistry between Don and Craig was fantastic.
when Don Warrington came in, it was like, you know, this is the guy from Rising Damp. We were all about people coming in who were sort of heroes of all us guys, you know.
There was definitely a buzz of, wow, we've got Don Warrington. so yeah, that was good. But he was, I don't think we ever realised how well that was going to work. And I think the day when he came down in costume, that was like, oh my God, he looks fantastic, because you don't get that in rehearsals. And that just changed it completely.
I think the whole uniform essentially was designed around Jane Horrocks, because I knew Jane at the time, and she's very tiny and very petite, and it was to try and give her this sort of sexual siren sort of look. So the whole thing of this uniform had to be sort of streamlined so to sort of fit her, and everything else sort of followed on.
Well, maybe you'd like to have sex sometime next week? I'm free Wednesday morning.
I'm sorry, I'm busy Wednesday. I'm killing myself.
It was by far the simplest in technical terms for me, because there was lots of it was shot in a lift, which was very easy and very quick to do.
I was never in any of the scenes on the hollow ship, so I do remember staring at it in admiration from a distance, going, I wish I could be in that. If only Chris was allowed. Because we weren't even allowed to walk on the floor, because the floor was all shiny white. There was big signs, keep the filthy cast off this set.
Crichton! Just thinking. Assuming, of course, we're not dealing with five-dimensional objects in a basically Euclidean geometric universe, and given the essential premise that all geomathematics is based on the hideously limiting notion that 1 + 1 = 2, and not as Astromeyer correctly postulates that 1 and 2 are in fact the same thing observed from different precepts.
Well, yeah, the dodecahedron, or hodron, or whatever his speech was pretty mad. And when I saw it back in the commentaries, I thought I couldn't do that now. You know, it'd take me a week to learn that one speech now, you know, let alone sort of half a day then. You know, it was, I was quite impressed, actually.
Fawlty Towers has various length episodes. I mean, there's at least 2, I'm sure, that are 35. And there's a real sort of tyranny of, oh, it's got to be 29, 30. And some stories take more telling than others. And you've always, you know, when you structure it, you have an idea of where you are and how long the show is going to last. But there just seemed so much stuff we could do with the Rimmer-Nirvana-Crane relationship. It just got longer and longer.
It was obviously too much to shoot.
He must have just hacked it back in the edit.
I think Holly's biggest scene in that series was in Hollow Ship, where Rimmer comes rushing in and explains all this stuff to Holly. Well, he's in a bit of a panic, but that was deleted.
Crichton, where is he?
Hello, Holly. How are you? Fine, thanks, Arnold. You haven't seen Crichton, have you? Yes, I have, actually. He's in the sleeping quarters.
Yeah, I'm sure when I watched it, I was going, oh, wow, that was my big moment.
What a charming man.
You think, well, it did actually slow down the episode. any of that kind of thing where someone's rushing and the other person's, you know, being an obstacle just makes the whole pace slower.
If you watch it, you can sort of tell that a load of stuff has been sort of pulled out of it. In fact, have you noticed when Jane Horrocks sits on the bed and ties her silk dressing gown up, she ties it up about twice. Then she stands up and it's completely open. I was watching it thinking, what happened?
I'm sorry, I must have seemed very ignorant. I hardly said anything apart from Geronimo.
One morning we were rehearsing and we came in as usual and I couldn't find Craig, and I remember getting on the mobile phone and his girlfriend had said, oh, he's left home, he's not here, he left home ages ago. And I couldn't find him and I was really worried he'd had a car crash or something like that. And then we just said, well, we can't find him, we'll have to start rehearsals without him.
Craig wasn't there, and 10:30 Craig wasn't there, 11 o'clock Craig wasn't there, and all the rest of the cast were getting a bit cross, and I was getting a bit cross, and Doug were getting a bit cross.
And we started rehearsing and I stood in, and then the next thing I know we hear this moaning and groaning, and he woke up and he was on the bunk in Red Dwarf, and he'd been asleep for the whole of the time that we'd all been waiting for him. And he said, I was in ages ago, I've been here for hours.
The Inquisition begins. Prove to me you are worthy of the honor of life, or drink deeply from the well of nothingness for all eternity.
I hate these either-or questions.
I think that one was about as complicated as Rob and Doug ever got in Series 5. Yes, I found it mind-blowingly complicated.
Oh, baffled all of us. I mean, completely foxed by it. Because you'd always do that thing where you go, well, do I know yet? Do I know that I've got the hand? Yes, Robbie, you know you've got the hand. Well, how do I know? Because, you know, they'd read the script, you took the hand there and you went through and you got the glove. And all right, I do know. So I definitely know I've got the glove. Yes, you know you've got it.
In rehearsals it made no sense at all because we had to keep changing the Inquisitor's head and different people getting inside the body. So, yeah, it was confusing. A lot of the time it wasn't until we watched it back that we went, oh, that's what it was about.
The time thing has always been difficult to get your head round, but fortunately, as long as Doug's around, you can always ask him.
Now, what do I say when I pop up behind the Inquisitor?
Perfect. Now, what do you want?
That's it. Yeah, that's it. I know. I've got it. Don't tell me. Don't tell me. I've got it. I've got it.
What are you going to do? I know. That's right. Because that was very cruel, because that was always my reaction when we were doing rehearsals. And I'd get to some point and go, and someone would read out the line, I know it. Of course, I hadn't got a clue. I didn't know it at all.
I don't think Holly had too much to do in that one. She got a bit, you know, shut the door, open the door and that kind of thing. And I tried to work on the theory that if you're a comic, you know, there's this meant to be this belief that if you're a comic, you can make the phone directory sound funny. So I kind of had that idea in my mind that even when it's like, the doors are closing now, or mind the doors, or something like that.
Please state your name and clearance code.
Steady, 000-169.
I have no record of your palm print.
Jack Doherty? I couldn't remember him.
I think he was a friend of Rob and Doug's.
I remember him occasionally at meal times and things, but no, as soon as that outfit went off, you know, he was the character.
I think it was just he was tall and he fitted the costume at the end of the day. I'm sure that's what it was.
We've met Jack and Murray Hunter, his writing partner, when we were at Spitting Image.
Well, Rob and Doug gave me and Murray Hunter sort of our first job. I dropped out of university to become staff writers at BBC Radio.
And these guys sent in 2 sketches which were just utterly fabulous. And it was just like, oh, gold.
And we kind of, then we just, you know, we ended up being friends, right, sort of drinking together and watching football and stuff like that. And I think they were fans of Absolutely anyway, so they just sort of worked their way through.
We had Gordon Kennedy from Absolutely as well, so that's Jack Doherty, Gordon Kennedy, and we had Morwenna Banks as well as a lift attendant, I believe.
Even now, years later, if I meet those people somewhere, they remember that. You know, they will always say, "Oh God, we remember when I did Red Dwarf." You know, obviously holds up because he was only actually on that show for a few days. I mean, 4 or 5 days he would have worked on it.
He was very, very patient because he had this mask on all the time. So I mean, it could in fact have been anybody, and he could have just dubbed the voice on afterwards.
Presumably they'd been through, you know, Spotlight asking Ian McKellen and whoever else was around, Ray Fiennes and proper actors, and then they thought, oh, we'll give it to John.
We had so many people coming in masks and that, and it was, you know, sometimes I'd never see them in, because I was always having a makeup job done myself, you know. for an hour and a half. So I very rarely saw people in their normal guise. You know, it was like, who's that under the Yeti outfit? You know.
All will be judged.
The voice was artificially twiddled with. Originally, I was going to expunge people from the universe, and which is my interpretation. But Rob and Doug weren't into that. And then I did it really shouty. I shouted a lot.
I am the Inquisitor! Prepare yourself for oblivion!
This is going to sound really pathetic, because I'm now going to mention Robert De Niro in connection with this. Bob, a very clever actor. Bobby, and I read an article where I think he'd done The Untouchables or something, but he said powerful men never shout. And I thought, oh, well, that'll be my way into, and so I'll growl.
The hologram. You shall be first.
And I remember asking Rob and Doug, and I said, well, you know, what's an Inquisitor? And they said, oh, you know, well, he's sort of bad, and sort of Darth Vader meets Frankenstein meets sort of, you know. And it was literally, that was the brief. And we went away, and I was looking at pictures recently, and I know that there are bits and pieces, because you know we're always on a tight budget, and there are parts of uniform, or costumes that we've used from series, I think it was series 4 and series 3, you know, bits of simulants, bits of stuff, bits of armour. And once you get that base, I mean, the only thing we really had made was the mask.
What you have to remember is I was quite a beauty in my youth. And I think when Craig particularly, when he heard I was in it, because, you know, even charitably described as, you know, not particularly easy on the eye. And I think it was, you know, usual actor jealousy. When they heard I was doing it, insisted on the mask. And I think Craig actually built the mask. Because you'll notice that Robert, who's a beautiful man, I think, is also always covered up.
Gamma Delta 145.
They knew that they wanted this big, bulky gauntlet with flashing lights on it, with a button on it. There had to be a dial that they could set on it. There had to be a firing button. They wanted the tip of the index finger to sort of light up when it fired.
You can see every now and again I'm looking down to try and get, because to get a light to shoot out the end, you have to get these two metal bits to touch together, which I could never do in this big. And of course, obviously they were going to then put on special effects, the actual, you know, because what actually turned on was like a little bulb, which you wouldn't have seen standing that close with binoculars.
I have to say, watching it back, I just fell in love with Crichton all over again. I loved what Robert did with that character. And it sort of reminded me of sort of what a little fussy little mechanoid he was. And I thought, God, he's sort of like the space version of Hyacinth Bouquet. You know, he's just a little fussy person. And if you look at him in the Inquisitor scene where he interrogates himself, I mean, that is a most beautifully honed piece of acting. I was completely struck when I watched it back.
In a human, this behavior might be considered stubborn. But I am not human, and neither are you. And it is not our place to judge them. I wonder why you do.
Yeah, I liked Crichton's speech actually in that bit. That was good. Mine was kind of just the cat being the cat.
I've given pleasure to the world because I have such a beautiful ass.
And, you know, no matter what, you know, you pull up the mask and you're going to have a sort of quick fire, you know, one-liner or several one-liners in a row. I mean, I don't remember that episode that great, actually.
I do remember the court case and that, where they lit me in green, and I looked about 306. I mean, you can't put, on my skin, you can't put a green light on it. And honestly, I looked like a school.
It's kind of fun, even on a small scale, as Red Dwarf is, because you sort of pretend you're in Star Wars and Lucas is directing, and it's not, you know, Rob and Doug standing over there, and you know, you've only got this much space to do it.
So just because I haven't written any symphonies or painted the Sistine Chapel, that makes me prunable?
No, being a totally worthless, unwashed space bum, that's what makes you prudent. I lived quite near Craig, so that was accidental. I wasn't stalking him or anything. So I had this old Wolsey, 1969 Wolsey, that would just about make it to Shepperton Studios every day. One time the back axle went as we was driving along, so we had to be towed to the studio by the AA one morning. Another time going back home, I had two listers in the car one time. Jake Abrahams in the Inquisitor.
He's a good mate of mine as well, even to this day, so it was good having him in. In fact, people used to think I did that sitcom that he did all those years ago, with the three of them sat on a park bench.
Which was a bit confusing for me, and even more confusing when I got stopped by the police for speeding.
Really, for smack's sake!
The other policeman was still in the police car, and he was sitting there typing up numbers, you know, the registration stuff, and then it must have clicked. So he come out and started walking towards me, and he goes, and he's like looking through the windscreen like this, and he goes, "It is you, isn't it? It is you." And the other bloke's going, "Who is it?" He's going, "Holly, Red Dwarf." And the first policeman's going, "What are you on about?" And he goes, "Oh, it's Holly from Red Dwarf." So he looks in the car and he goes, "And Lister! It's Lister as well!" And he's so excited. Then he looks in the back, he goes, "Oh my God, there's another Lister!" And this first policeman was getting really annoyed with him, going, "What are you talking about?" And in the end, he just thumped on the top of the car on the roof and went, "Well, if you can drive that old battered spaceship, you can drive this," and let me go.
Crichton personal black box recording. Time unknown. Location unknown. Cause of accident unknown. Should someone find this recording, perhaps it will shed light as to what happened here.
The look of that opening sequence is fantastic. And that was done in a very small studio next door to the one we normally worked in.
The good thing about it was we filmed outside, inside, like it wasn't done in a lot at the back of Shepperton, so it didn't look like we were on a little piece of scrubland at the back of Shepperton Studios. We actually turned the studio into an outside, you know, trees and hedges and stuff like that.
You'd sort of think that when they're doing a kind of, you know, body lying in mud, that they would have polystyrene mud that would be all comfortable. But no. Let's bring in some real mud for Robert. So I was lying in a kind of huge pile of earth with bits of grass stuck in it, with my sort of buried to the waist up so that they could have the fake legs coming out the front. Yeah, I've been more comfortable.
That entire sequence where he's crashed and removes his hand and the finger and eyeball is one of my favourite sequences that the effects crew have ever been involved in Red Dwarf.
There was an extra prosthetic sort of eye cover with a blasted out eye with a bit of wire hanging out of it, so I only had one eye working. And then I had to do quite a lot of, you know, talking and prop work. Stressful at the best times.
That's the one with the hand, you know, in the boxes.
I love that hand. And it worked. That was a real hand. That actually walked along on its own. It was fantastic, that little thing.
There was a puppeteered version that could be operated via rod and cables from off camera. And there was another one that was obviously a prop one that Crichton could pull the fingertip off, pull the eyeball out, click it all back together. Andy Bowman also then mechanised a third version of the hand, which was completely self-contained. Turn it on, the fingers all start, you know, doing that, and then it was just pulled across set.
It was a brilliant scene. We were typing messages to each other, you know. When you're rehearsing, you just don't know how that's going to go. But play to the audience, it went through the roof, you know.
I remember it's Danny and Craig, isn't it? They just kept on going like this, and with enough cutaways, you can just speed it up so that it doesn't get boring.
That had to be edited for the audience to see before the show. And I said to her, "Hey, let's do this together." And she said, no, I want to do it on my own. I shot it, I know how it all goes together. And I went, "But usually I'm in the edit." And she said, no, it'll be great, it'll be fine, just chill, it'll be fine, let me do it. So we then had the dress rehearsal, and the little film inserts are played in, just to get an idea of the timing and how the show all works. And that bit came in and was just awful, just didn't work at all. And the cast were all going open-mouthed looking at this. So I then had to, I said, "Look, let me have a play with that," and I took it and re-edited it during the dinner break in time for the audience to come in.
It was a big relief when, you know, it was shown and the audience actually was laughing. It did turn out to be a funny scene, but it was a bit nerve-wracking thinking, if this isn't funny, this is going to be Scrambled Egg City.
The thing about me not having many lines is that I did 6 days of being at the studio like everyone else, so it gave me lots of time to watch everybody else, really, and, you know, to watch Chris being oiled.
He's too keen to get his top off, I think, that man.
He'd been working out for months for that scene, you know, because he was a weed before that, and all of a sudden he takes his top off and it's Arnold bloody Schwarzenegger.
I think I know the scene to which you're referring. Is it me, or has it suddenly got rather hot in here?
He read the script and thought, I'm going down the gym. Oh, he's a cheating bastard, he is.
I didn't obviously leap down to the gym and do sort of, you know, sort of get one of those Charles Atlas sort of books out, you know, and drink lots of Complan and everything.
I think he'd been ripping and buffing, because he did look magnificent. I mean, he made quite a lot of confirmed heterosexuals get a little bit interested.
I would have shagged him.
I had a fitness regime anyway, so you know, that sort of I was in a reasonable shape at the time.
And one of the girls that did the oiling is Sarah Stockbridge, who's Vivienne Westwood's best model at the time. She's just enormous and glorious, and I think all the crew were fairly open-mouthed when she stepped on set.
Eyes were definitely diverted to her, I think. And I think Chris was quite nervous about it as well at the time.
Well, it was all right as things go. You know, what did you do at work today, Daddy? You know, got oiled by 2 attractive girls. You know, that's by any standards is a decent day at work, isn't it? Really. But there were wood shavings in the oil because of the situation we were in, and so that was sort of. It became slightly sandpaper-esque after a while. But, you know, I'm not really complaining.
Boy, am I glad to see you.
The self-loathing beast that is about to assault Chris when he's all oiled up took hours and hours of, you know, and it was this incredible, it was like an alien monster. It was brilliantly done, but then they never actually, all you ever saw was the shadow.
With the time restrictions, they did an amazing job. And with that particular creature, when it was shot in as a still frame, it looked terrific. But when it was animated, it didn't look so good. And as we know, I mean, even in the first Alien movie, there was very little alien in, because it was better what the audience imagined the alien was doing rather than what the alien was doing.
It was designed as a full 6-foot, puppeteered, partial animatronic creature, and ultimately the full body version was only used to cast a shadow of the demon on a wall.
That poor alien. You know, he went home to see his alien mum. I got a part in Red Dwarf.
Well done, son. I'm really proud, Mum. I'm going to be in Red Dwarf. No, you're not. You're just a shadow.
We could have done it with a bit of cut-out paper.
It's there. I mean, if it, you know, without the build that we'd done, I think it would have been tricky to achieve all the shots. But no, at no point did you ever cut back to see the demon in all its glory.
I say let's get into the jet-powered rocket pants and Junior Birdman the hell out of here.
Most people would recognise that costume from earlier series. Do you know that? You see, because it used to be black and white. And then Howard, you know, he's just sort of imaginative like that, you know.
We had this zebra coat, and I remember Jill, my assistant, and I think it was about 4 of us, that the night before, with about 40 felt pens, actually coloured it in, because we tried to have it dyed, and because they couldn't guarantee the fabric would take or that it would shrink or whatever. So we coloured it in, and to this day you can see it's close up, it's very shoddy.
I think everyone actually liked the yellow better than the original. I mean, they loved the black and white one because of that great double scene doing the hand slap, where it was so featured. And because of that scene was so memorable, you know, when I slapped hands with myself, I thought the costume would be too memorable to actually change it. So when it came off, you know, I was quite happy about that, and so was Howard.
The outside scenes on Terraform were the first things I shot when I got the job, and I think Rob and Doug and I had decided that they had to be visually very sumptuous, and no one was tired because it was the first thing we shot, and we just piled a lot of time and energy and money and visual effects into it, and it really worked. I mean, I think it is glorious.
They were very keen from the production's point of view that this had flames belching out of the water and smoke drifting across and mist. So Peter went out with a physical effects crew. I think James Davis was one of his principals on that one. And they rigged propane gas forks under the water.
That's the first night shoot I can remember doing. Because I think we did some others after that, but that was a really crazy one. At that time, I couldn't swim. I still was a non-swimmer. I've learnt since. It's very embarrassing. Having children and you can't swim, they do tend to mention it.
But they're so game, that cast. They'll do anything. Seriously, they'll do anything.
So I was quite nervous getting in this big boat in a heavy costume with a rubber head on, and there were lots of lovely frogmen in the water. charming frogmen who were going, you know, you're all right, Robert, don't worry. I was a little bit nervous.
We were in a boat, supposedly at a gentle pace. Craig decides to light his cigarette on one of the burning fires on the lake.
Don't go outside of the flambeaus, just go in between them.
Have you got a light there to light that? And I'm getting the lads to roll me close to the flames, and they're going, why? And I get my cigarette out, and I light my cigarette out on one of these gas blowers, you know.
We went right over the flames, so there were flames coming all around, with loads of people on the bank going, get away from the flames!
Craig, don't bugger about.
The boat starts rocking. Certain actors don't like water.
Craig, I can't swim. Craig.
Craig's enjoying it, and we're all thinking, hypothermia.
I was a bit crazy in them days, but it was it lightened the evening because it was freezing as well, you know.
I also think there was a fatal mistake of giving all the actors a tot of rum to keep us going in the cold night, which for most adult males is absolutely acceptable because they can deal with it. But I was immediately one little egg cupful of rum and I was all over the place.
But it was very gorgeous, and I think Peter Wragg did all that lovely smoke across the river, and we had stunt coordinators for all the sort of Roundhead and Cavalier scenes, and it was great. It was huge fun.
Haven't you bitterness? Take that, self-doubt. Die like the dog you are, mistrust. Feel my blade, loneliness. May your foulness rot in hell.
Hugely extravagant, tried to do the Three Musketeers, but bigger. I mean, the hats weighed a ton. They were so huge, they had to be, you had to put foam in them. They kept slipping down over his eyes. You could, just ridiculous, but funny.
In every situation like that in my career, I think, whenever I've learnt for lots of sessions and how to do sword fighting or stick fighting or anything like that, in the edit, it's always looked as if I could have spent 10 seconds learning one particular stroke of the stick, because you actually never see much of it at all, And that was the same with the sword fighting. I mean, we did quite a lot of sort of try to learn the bits, and in the end, not much of it was used, really.
They've been naughty boys, haven't they, Mr. Flibble?
Yes.
What happens to naughty boys who've been naughty, Mr. Flibble?
Quarantine's great because we knew we could do snow. It's one of those things that, having done it on season 3 for the snow crash in Marooned, we knew the techniques, we'd got those down pat, and it always looks impressive. And the opening sequence of Quarantine, where you do that lovely, lovely move across to reveal the base, Moose Base Alpha, as it was christened. Again, it's a nice long model shot. It's a nice showcase piece for us, and we had a lot of fun creating it.
Why do we never meet anyone nice? Why is it we never meet anyone who can shoot straight?
It's the old cowboys and Indians stuff. The cowboys hit the Indians first time. The Indians' arrows always whiz past and thunk into the scenery behind you.
It is always that lovely thing of when you run through here, there's going to be some explosions. I think probably by Series 5, I'd realised that meant that there would be some sparks flying around, which you feel slightly protected with the rubber head on, that you're not, because that's the thing of getting a spark in the face. But they were very loud and sparky.
We wire very, very small pyrotechnic charges onto predetermined areas of the scenery that can be fired, and they give a shower of sparks as if something's ricocheted off the metalwork. And it means that if you've got your cast running through a particular scene, you can predetermine where these things are going to go off and fire them in sequence. So you've got the impression of things exploding all around them, but on the whole, you've got an effects designer, normally Peter, sitting off camera, looking at where the cast are and when it's safe to fire those individual charges as they run past.
No one's got any virus and no one's smegging nuts.
Well, that's good.
For some reason, that image of the gingham dress has remained very, very popular with a lot of Red Dwarf fans. male Red Dwarf fans who want to wear a big gingham dress. But I've yet to go to any science fiction convention or anything to do with Red Dwarf where there isn't at least one person walking around in big steel toe-cap boots and a red gingham dress.
We're here to entertain you.
That was fun. I like dressing up.
Chris in a big mad frock. Widow Twanky.
It was just such a strange thing, and Chris was just loving every minute of it. He was hysterical. Very, very funny. But of course it wasn't revealed until we saw the costume, so rehearsals was very different from the real thing.
He brought in a number of dresses from home and just said to Doug and Rob, you know, which one do you think could be best for the show? And they chose that one. I don't know why.
Mr. Flibble's very cross.
Mr. Flibble, I don't know why that was never a toy. Could have made a fortune out of the toys. Look what Gordon the Gopher did.
You know, my spitting image training, all 10 years of it, came in rather handy for that. That was a great help, so I already could gain control of Flibble, as opposed to him gaining control of me.
Flibble was just meant to be a knock-up for rehearsal.
Literally brought in from some charity shop. Glove puppets are brought in, you know, from various Punch and Judys to various sort of animals. And Flibble just happened by chance to be there, and, you know, soft and furry, and so was used. But there was a constant, you know, what are we going to use, what are we going to use? And I think there were loads and loads of puppets brought in.
We did think that Mr. Flibble might be quite popular. I think we used to take him home in turns, actually, and keep him for a little while. I definitely think so. Well, I mainly did, because he was props, and so I was looking after him.
They just rejected everything else, and well, why don't we just go with the, you know, the fluffy penguin? Now he's the star.
Mr. Flibble was difficult to work with. I mean, you know, I normally will always publicly be very supportive of my fellow actors, but Mr. Flibble was a complete, I can't say it.
Although I thought the hex bits were a bit like, it was a bit Blake 7. You know, when the eyes went red. It was all a bit Blake 7.
When I watch it back now, I thought I sort of nearly was sinister. A lot of people think that I did come across as being quite sinister, but I thought I could have done it more, really. But I think I permanently had something up there saying you're in a gingham dress with a silly puppet in the end of your hand, you know?
Most of the enjoyable pastimes are... shit. Oh, there.
Well, yeah, I like to shit all over.
I need this line on the board. Give it to me.
Okay. It's a bad luck virus. We all caught the bad luck virus. And it just spread.
Not a cross word, not an angry exchange.
But normally I'm quite sort of strong on the lines, you know. In fact, normally when it breaks down, they all look at me and say, what's me line?
And not only would he know his lines, he would know everyone else's lines as well. And that's one of the very rare occasions where not only did the cast not know their lines, or the rest of the cast, but Craig didn't know his.
Yeah, but we all knew we could stroll out the door at any time. Not now, though. Now we're stuck here. Oh, Was it? What? No, it wasn't. Oh, it wasn't me? No. Oh, good.
It was just the most excruciating, painful scene ever, I think, we've ever shot. And took, I think it was 4 days to edit, to just get all the lines and put them together. I mean, we had so much footage. We were shooting this, I mean, the normal show lasts from 7:30 until 10, and we spent a whole hour on that 3-minute scene.
I mean, it was quite a common experience for scenes to fall apart. I don't think it was specific to quarantine, but it certainly did happen then. And often, if one of us got the giggles or it went a bit silly, it would collapse very quickly, and it would take a strong hand of the comedy police to come in. Have a quick word, boys. Do the job. Shut up.
Duck! Left! Right!
Juliet she was like thrown in really at the deep end. Did Demons and Angels first, Highs and Lows, originally called, or the other way around. And it was just like she had to film each person in 3 different costumes and split screen, things like that, in which, you know, if you've just walked in off of doing a stand-up show where one person at a time walks on stage and walks off, it's like a complete nightmare.
It was incredibly difficult, especially since it was the first one and I was, you know, finding my feet. But it got done. And, you know, I do think that before I started Red Dwarf, I didn't even know what a split screen was. And so to be given that to start with was a pretty steep learning curve.
I think obviously it was the first show for all of us to get used to the new director, but I think it was also a very, very difficult show to do.
You know, you ain't going to shoot it in half an hour.
For anybody who's normally done straight sitcoms, it's very unusual to say that you have to shoot a scene in lock-off, and of course Red Dwarf is littered throughout with doing lock-off shots where we can double them up in the same scene.
It's like doing an enormous puzzle, and you have to tick all the boxes because the costume and makeup changes are enormous on Red Dwarf, and if you send someone away to get into costume number 2 and you haven't actually finished with costume number 1 and they're already halfway through changing and you realise that you haven't actually got that shot you need to piece it all together, you just can't do it because there isn't the time.
I took the raw elements of what each character to be, and you know, they all were bits and mishmash of this, that and the other.
Wardrobe was always excited when I got extra outfits, and that too in one. I liked the black wig actually, and there is a picture somewhere of me in the a publicity photo, but it hasn't come out very much, but I do like the one with me at the high holly.
They all had open-toe sandals, they all had crystals around their necks, they had purses with herbs and spices, and it was something that visually you just looked at and went, oh, well, that's what it is.
It was very interesting. Half of it was the most comfortable I've ever been, and as the High Crichton was gorgeous to wear that, because all I had was a pair of pants and a big gold robe. I was so comfortable. I could sit down. Oh, it was heaven. And then but the flip side, the Dark Crichton was the most uncomfortable I've ever been still to this day, because that was a huge quilted motorbike jacket from somewhere like Norway. So you could ride a motorbike in kind of, you know, sub-zero temperatures. So then go into a hot studio with a rubber head on and then put this zzz, and once I was in that was Steam City.
I think it just shows really what good actors those 4 are, because they do have great range. Particularly Chris, he's got a huge range.
I loved Chris dressed up as Julian Clary, basically, wasn't he? It was Julian Clary. I'm going to whip you, then I'm going to have you. I loved all that. And he enjoyed it far too much. Did you notice? He got right into that.
I can't remember when Doug and Rob broke that to me, but when I heard the news, I was nonplussed, to say the least.
Chris was like, Harry, I think we might have gone a bit too far.
Obviously, the thing that you remember are fishnets. As soon as anyone says that, then the rest sort of falls into place. It was actually the rest that was the most uncomfortable.
And it was only when he came out of his trailer, I think Danny was passing, and Danny, as only Danny, he nearly died laughing. I mean, he was on the floor. He hadn't seen anything so funny.
Everything about that costume was just incredibly unpleasant, and maybe it was that way to make me feel very unpleasant, because everything I had to say was pretty unpleasant.
And he realised out of all of them, even though he looked the most ridiculous, he looked really hysterically funny. So he went for it.
Another element of Rimmer's character, I think, was brought to the extreme, which we were meant to be, you know. Now, I had a more what would have been a wilder element of the Cat family, you know. If we would have found one of the arcs, there would have been a guy like that on there, you know, the bully. Yeah.
We took all the sort of fur, animalistic elements that were there, you know, with the prehistoric teeth, and so it was everything that would be like roadkill. That's what he'd be wearing, all that.
The teeth were more of a take on like the saber-toothed tiger, you know, a cat, you know. So just we'd, you know, always go into some element of the cat's sort of persona. If you actually look at the show, you can actually see them coming in and out like this, and you think, they're going to fall out of his mouth or what? They're very difficult to keep in. I think I went home and took it like this because I was holding the teeth in all that.
We just kept rearranging the cardboard boxes to make new corridors, so it always looked a bit different, and we were permanently moving stump boxes round and you'd think this place went on for miles, but it was actually the same little space. We just kept rejigging these boxes around to make it look different.
Because I had to punch through a wall where I couldn't see Craig, but I mean, I won't say a wall, although I'm tough. It was made of polystyrene. And there were 2 special marks on the wall, like 2 crosses there, and I had to punch with both hands and then strangle Craig through the wall and then go through the wall, and it was, you know, it was all going to be marvellous. The first time we did it, his head stopped right in front of one of the crosses, which of course I couldn't see, so I went, because I thought, I've got to hit it really hard to get through. Smacked my hand into the back of Craig's head.
And he's supposed to go bang through the wall, and it's with his hands either side of me, completely missed, bang, right in the back of the head, and then I fell and banged my elbow against a metal oil drum.
And he went sort of, ouch, but I couldn't hold anything for about a week. He had a vague bump on the back of his enormously strong head, and I think I cracked 2 knuckles. I mean, I was in a lot of pain. And I had big gloves on with studs.
It hurt. It did hurt. But hey, you know, we're space heroes. You've got to get on with it.
Yeah, he does all his own stunts. He's not having a stand-in.
Brother Rimmer is portraying agony. The agony of the soul that searches out the truth. The truth danced by Brother Cat.
The great thing about the dance was, you know, that we had to make it, you know, it was Martha Graham. I mean, that was what it was all about, you know. It just couldn't have been a couple of guys coming in doing these at Mother Brown, you know.
I don't know where that came from, but that was just something that you know, again, that I don't know, I think Danny had a contribution to make to that.
Yes, we're ballet, darling, but we've gone on from ballet. We are more sort of hedonistic and flowy.
But that was great. I enjoyed playing the high rimmers. We could have done quite a lot with that, you know, all that Babbling Brook stuff was great fun.
I couldn't keep a straight face because we were just rehearsing it with Chris. And if you look again, you'll see Chris is 100% in it.
There is a grievous fault with thine weapon. It keepeth shooting people. You see? There it goes again.
Yeah, one of those things you've always wanted to do as a kid, and when they start wiring you up, you start urinating.
It's obviously an potentially inherently dangerous process, and therefore you try and do as much as possible, everything possible, to ensure that nobody's going to get hurt.
When Pete says it won't hurt, you always worry.
We'd had all that done before, where you have, you know, shots going off on you, and that was all fine. And I had a sort of body plate underneath, I think. So there was these...
One of these metal plates came loose from the vest, dropped down, and was hanging by its firing wire in the region of Robert's groin.
Down below. And that at the time it went off, I think just the position I was standing in, the charge was pointing from my inner right thigh to my inner left thigh, which meant I got a bit of a shock from that one. So the sudden shock that High Crichton experienced, was quite realistic.
What is this?
It's a greeting gift. Sparkling, welcome all. Come, let us embrace its splendid beauty and share in its vibrations.
That's right, that burnt Danny's foot, yes. It rolled into Danny's foot. It was basically like one of the gentler fireworks that you'd use for a children's firework party. It's just nice colours. But hold it next to your toe. It is rather hot. I don't know what the temperature of those things is, but it's a few thousand degrees. So Danny did some realistic hopping dancing after that.
That's, you know, it's always part of the game, you know, stuntmen running through blazing fires and that, but actors, you can guarantee if there's a little spark that lands on their toe, it's going to hurt.
And then the maggots, of course, had to have the maggots. Will Craig, what a stupid question to ask, you know, the stage manager, will Craig eat the maggots? Of course he will. They're maggots.
No, they weren't maggots, I don't know. And that wasn't a real spider either.
I know I met the real tarantula, and I'm scared stiff of spiders, but the tarantula had its own minder and everything. I think it had a chain round its neck, and it was a huge, great thing. And it was actually so big that I wasn't frightened of it, because I just kept thinking it was like a small dog. It was like, if it had been slightly smaller, I'd have been screaming, but it was so huge. I actually held the tarantula and stroked it like it was a, you know, spaniel puppy or something. It was strange how it goes like that.
At the end of a series, you have a lovely rap party, and everybody's all, ha ha ha, we've done it, it's all in the can. But on that rap party, there was certainly the cast members were the most miserable people in the room. Everybody else was going, yeah, we done another Red Dwarf.
I remember having a dance with Timothy Spall. That's my main memory of the rap party. I haven't seen him since. I don't think I've trodden his toes or anything.
And the next day, after the rap party, when we finished, we had to go back in and reshoot quite a lot of particularly of Demons and Angels, quite a large section of that, and it was really difficult. It was not fun. We didn't have a lot of laughs that day. It was quite, the trench humour was thin on the ground.
It was a bit like school's over, no it's not. And I was really surprised that a lot of the cast were like, oh, we've got to come back. When it was like, guys, we're in such trouble, remember? You know how all the shows didn't work out and how there were big holes and none of them made sense? Well, although it's not in your contracts to come back, we need to repair the holes because otherwise this season's going to suck.
But I certainly remember losing it that day certainly for the first time, and I hope the last, because I hate doing that. But I think I just, somehow you reach a point where, you should be aware you've got a really good job, you're really lucky, you're really privileged, blah, 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 and it just, all that goes. All you can go is, if I have to kneel here another minute and boil myself, I'm going to explode. And I think that I was allowed to take my anger out on a piece of unneeded prop around the back of the set. So I sort of stomped on a broken laser gun or something. I don't know. I can't quite remember. It's great. Genuinely, you can't. There's very little recall of that. I know that something happened that day, and I'm sure I was hideous. And I'm very glad I've never witnessed it.
I don't ever remember him actually having his bad mood. I think a Robert bad mood compared to anyone else's bad moods, like so minute. Probably no one noticed he was having a bad mood because he doesn't do bad moods at all. But we just had to shoot all this stuff to make the series work.
This is a very, very bad dream, right?
Yeah, Rob and Doug really teased us with Back to Reality. They said they were going to do a Red Dwarf Next Generation. And I probably believed them more than the others, even though I ended up still being on the ship with the Next Generation, which was strange. But they teased us the whole week, going, yeah, we're getting rid of you at the end of this series and we're bringing in a younger lot.
I don't know why I wasn't worried, but I should have been, probably. I mean, there was a sort of, they played it for all they're worth. Rob and Doug really played it for all they're worth when the new cast arrived. They were all kind of handsome, especially Crichton. I thought that Crichton was really nice. He's a very tall, well-built man. And all he had was a shaved head. He was completely bald and he looked really good. And I went, oh, that's so unfair. Look at him.
All right, lads. How you feeling? Bit wonky?
And I was having the makeup put on, and Timothy Spall had to come into the same makeup room, and he really reacted quite strongly to the smell of the rubber and the glue. And it was really interesting. I talked to him about it later because he said that he'd just done I think a children's Christmas TV show, this would have been around that time, where he was a pig and he had a full face prosthetic makeup with a pig's snout. Much worse than Crichton, much, much worse. And it took 7 or 8 hours to stick this thing on. And he couldn't eat at all. He had to have a straw fed to him by someone else down the pig's mouth so that he could have a bit of water or something. And horrendously hot. And he really found it very, very difficult. I think he may even have had contact lenses in. So, I mean, it was really unpleasant.
Oh, whoa, that's a classic, that is. That's a classic.
It's hard to think that he's not a Brummie. He always gets the Brummie accent things, but he's not actually a Brummie.
How were we supposed to know that, you brummy git?
He was shaking and nervous and stuttering, and then it turns out he'd never, ever, ever performed in front of a live audience before.
Tim was nervous. He was speaking so quickly. He was tripping over his lines, so it wasn't easy to understand him a lot of the time.
So, honestly, you could see the sweat on his brow, his eyes were glazed, he was gone.
He started to garble the lines and give away these huge pieces of plot and garble them and then continue. And we were saying, no, stop, because we didn't want them given away to the audience. We wanted them protected.
He had his memory erased and was programmed to act like a complete prat, so no one suspected... would act like a complete prat, so no one suspected his secret mission to destroy Red Dwarf in order to guide Lister to his destiny.
And it's a bit like often when you do a joke, the cast, now they're really experienced, will always stop if they fluff halfway through a one-liner because they don't want to give their information away or the joke away to the audience, because when you retake it, they won't laugh because they've heard it already.
So we filmed it again, and he pulled it out of the bag. What a performance that second time round.
And we just decided to go reshoot the whole scene from the top when he was absolutely terrific.
It was amazing, but then again, that's why you have people like that in.
You helped an enemy of democracy escape. She was stealing an apple of the people.
What a cool guy. Yeah, no, he was icy cool. icy cool man. I mean, I didn't really spend that much time with him because, you know, he was just cool. And we just weren't.
Bullet cybernetics. It's traffic control.
I was doing Dwayne, so I couldn't even be cool. You know, I want to be an actor now, but you know, I want to do serious stuff because there's a, you know, this really serious American actor doing it very seriously. And I wanted to act like that, but I couldn't because I was Dwayne. So I get a chance to work with one of these sort of super cool American actors, and of course I'm being a complete plonker, you know.
He was proper Hollywood, yeah. And amazing eyes. I now wonder when I meet people with amazing eyes like that, because he had really piercing blue eyes. And I always believed that's what people's eyes were, but I worked with one actor years ago who had piercing blue eyes, and then he took them out. And they were contact lenses, and he had brown eyes, quite dull ones. So I don't know. I'm sure Lenny's are real.
Which one's Dwayne Dibley?
No, please, no. I don't want to be Dwayne Dibley.
I mean, I just felt so sorry for Dwayne. I had to look after him.
Good old Dwayne Dibley.
Things were just, ideas were just like coming in like this, you know.
Once those teeth are in, it transforms him.
You can see my face in that scene. It's like stone. You know, and I'm holding the teeth, I'm pushing my cheeks in. I'm doing everything as to not laugh, and the guys down the line are literally looking at me like this.
When Danny's Dwayne'd up, he does lose his cool. I was kind of helping him into the studio, and he couldn't see where he was going, and he was all nervous. So unlike normal Dan, it was extraordinary.
Well, when we first got it, it was definitely the Nutty Professor. You know, even when we did the makeup, we had a picture of the Nutty Professor. I saw the Nutty Professor, I saw the Three Stooges, you know, all those kind of wacky characters from that sort of style of comedy.
So this is really me? A no-style gimbo with teeth the Druids could use as a place of worship?
Having my wig done for the cat in Ray Marsden, and we had to get you know, this bob wig, and of course he didn't have that, you know, sort of. We literally down in the basement. Oh, there's this thing, this bit of hair. You can have that, you know, kind of thing, and that was how Dwayne's wig came about.
Dwayne Dibley was literally pulled together from, I think we went down this 1970s section at the BBC, and pulled out anything that remotely crackled when you touched it. It was all polyester, it was all acrylic, it was nasty, tight-fitting slacks, tank tops, big collared nylon polyester shirts, topped off with an anorak.
White socks, nylon shirt, plastic sandals, Airtex vest.
And again we've had to recreate Dwayne Dibley. So I think the last count we actually did the charity shops.
I had to get my mouth around him to talk, so it gave me this kind of whine because everything was pushed up into the palate, you know.
Ah, we could all put our heads together and the bullet could go down the line.
I couldn't have asked for a better character. To have one successful character in a show's something. To have two in the same show was ridiculous. You know, it was like, this can't be happening.
There was one sequence which we filmed where I had dark glasses on, Jake Bullet, and so that meant that I didn't have to have the eyes made up, and that was always the kind of extra bit. So in fact, if I'd taken the dark glasses off, you'd have seen the tragic truth of the Llewellyn eyes coming from underneath. And also wearing a nice suit and a you know, not being in the full costume always helped.
I like that wig I had. Sort of make completely, when I've got long straight hair, it completely changes the shape of my face and everything.
In what way?
I look kind of Asian.
Uh-oh, speed bumps. Chicane!
That was great fun. That was great fun.
I think we did all right, you know. It took a bit of rehearsal.
Amazing how badly we could do it to start with. When the bump, you know, we'd be going over speed bumps, and I think it was Chris and Dan in the back. They'd hit the speed bump first, even though we were going forwards. So they go boom boom, and then we go boom boom in the front. And that was like, no, it goes the other way. Boom 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 boom.
They had real trouble with the car chase scene, remembering what came after what, helicopter chicane, being fired at, bumps, speed bumps.
It was sort of an incidental thing, I seem to remember, but, you know, then eventually when you see how effective it can be, we started to make a thing of it.
So I said, well, shall I stand in front with a map? And they're going, what? And I said, I'll go off and draw a map. So I went off and drew big felt tip pens and this big bit of cardboard, and I drew the map. Instead of like writing speed bumps and all that, I drew this little map of trees and things and the road and going around stuff. I was quite proud of that. I probably broke some union law there somewhere, special effects or something, but...
Strangely enough, years before, I'd done a stage show where we did a very similar thing, where we were four guys in a rally car, which was falling to pieces as we were driving it on stage. So it was all mimed. A very similar thing. It was literally 4 seats, exactly that thing. So that was really good fun to suddenly be recreating that on Red Dwarf. I think much better, I have to say, on Red Dwarf.
Back to Reality was one of those pub sessions that we'd had with Rob and Doug. We'd met up in town. We'd been through what was coming up, and we'd said we want to do something underwater. We've done snow, we've done moons, we've done space, we've not done underwater. Let's have a crack at that. And they obliged us by writing in the Esperanto being a wreck on the seabed. The Starbug, every year it was crashed multiple times, endless times. We've built so many of those over the years. And in this case, yes, it had to crash. But this time, because of the nature and the requirements of the story, the crash had to make it look as though there's no way the cast have survived this time, because that was the entire gag of Back to Reality. So when it hits, when the explosion goes off, make everyone go, wow, we think they're dead.
Kerry was actually the first person who actually said, I really like Back to Reality. And I remember going, really? So many people have read it and they just said how difficult it will be to shoot. She went, no, I think it's a really strong show.
The thing is that we never really knew how the episodes were going to run, because some of those decisions were made in the edit. And so often it was a surprise to us as to what order they were going to go out in.
Without thinking, when we put in Back to Reality, our thought was, Back to Reality, obviously that would be the first show. Then we shot it and we put it together, and the audience reaction isn't fantastic on that show. We've had way better, bigger laughs in other shows. There was huge disappointment from both of us. And in fact, Rob got so depressed he just went home and stayed home for about 3 days while I was in the edit. And I remember phoning him and going, look, it's been recut now. Come down, have a look. I think it's all right, actually. I think it's quite good now. And he was going, really? And I'm going, yeah, no, I think, it could even go out first now. It's okay. And he came down and we looked at it. And then we talked and we said, no, actually, it is better for it to go out last, because if it does work at all, it'll have more impact going out last, because we genuinely could be either finishing the series at this point or preparing for a whole new format for the next season.
When we saw it and when we were recording it, like I say, it kind of scared me at least. And I think it's, the others gave them a bit of a twinge of like, oh my God, is this the end of it all? And apparently that had the same effect on the viewers when they watched it. And I don't know if the BBC switchboard was jammed, but apparently it only takes 2 calls anyway.
It was a great bluff spoof ending, wasn't it? Everyone thought, wow, we're in a video game. This is it. It's all over.
I wasn't really worried about that. I was just really, like any other Red Dwarf episode, just keen to see how it was going to evolve.
But I think a lot of it was nervous laughter.
I think they did think it was the end.
People literally thought that the characters are over and, game over.
It very well could have been, I suppose, because if the American series had taken off, I'm not sure what would have happened then.
I don't think they could have restart a Red Dwarf situation with quite the same impact,
I took care of that. Limpet mines. There's enough fried calamari out there to feed the whole of Italy.
Yeah, Series 5 was the last series I did. It wasn't my choice, I have to say. I did get the call, like you get the call, oh, there's going to be another series. So I did get, oh, there's going to be another series. So I got that excitement type call. And there had been rumours about giving Holly a bigger part. So I got asked into the Grant Naylor office, for a chat. So for once in my life, I was being optimistic. I'm usually a terrible pessimist, but at that time I was optimistic. I thought, oh wow, we're going to talk about making Holly a bigger part. I said, oh, we've wanted to talk to you about Holly.
And somehow it seemed a little bit of a serious tone. And I said, oh yeah, you're going to give me the sack? And they went, well, not exactly. And I went, what? And they said, well, we've kind of run out of ideas for Holly, which really you could have seen that, I suppose, in Series 5 in a way, because of the, close the door, open the door type lines.
Got a bit of a problem with the cargo bay doors.
It was just painful. It was painful having a read through where Hattie only had 2-3 lines. And then we'd always go, oh, Hattie, sorry, your part's really small this week, but we're definitely going to give you, some more lines later on, and we'll give them, to you maybe in a couple of days. And then we wouldn't have those lines because we wouldn't have thought of them, because we just couldn't write a good part for her. So very painfully we decided that we needed to change for after season 5. So we invited her into the office to tell her. It was just, she took it terrifically well, but it was horrible, horrible.
I've realised later from other people being dropped from series that I was pretty much honoured to be told in person and to be given a present. Some people I've known have just had a letter, like, go away. Type letter, but they were actually really nice.